Hi all. Thank you for putting down your cookies and joining us here for the after lunch session. Just a process remark first. In your programs, you'll see listed Rabbi Jason Rubenstein. Rabbi Rubenstein was stranded by our Amtrak train system in Cambridge, but this is Broadway. You don't have to remember you're on Broadway right now. So we have an understudy, and joining us today on absolutely no notice, or about an hour's notice, is Rabbi Daniel Brenner. But I will talk about everyone's bona fides in just a moment. I want to give you a sense of what the session is about and do introductions, and I'll turn it over. If you've been paying attention, every session has, sometimes multiple times, referred to this session as when all the answers are going to be provided. The session itself didn't have to come to a conclusion. I could have people disagreeing, but the Jewish educators will tell us how it's done. So in a sense, this session mirrors the experience of Jewish educators. We carry the weight of the future on our shoulders, and now we have 1 hour to deal with it. So very similar to the experience many of us have out there. When it comes to Zionism and pedagogy, we face challenges that underlie this conference in general. That is, what is Zionism today, tomorrow, and beyond? We also face the everyday challenges that Jewish educators face every day. The broad range of settings in which Jewish education takes place, the diversity of learners, the diversity of the people delivering this education. Who's a Jewish educator? You're a parent, you're a Jewish educator. So making generalizations about a field like that is very difficult. And there's a diverse group up here that will reflect that. The other thing I'll mention is the tension or an interesting dynamic that's inherent in the title of this program, Zionism and Pedagogy, Teaching During Difficult Times. And we've been talking about how the teaching of Zionism in Israel has become complicated, but that's not the only thing that's making this a difficult time. So even without that in an equation, we are teaching in a difficult time. And we're teaching all kinds of things, not just Zionism in Israel in difficult times. Just because we're focusing here for 2 days on Zionism in Israel doesn't mean that our Jewish educators could put aside all of their other priorities and needs to focus on that. Luckily, there's a lot of overlap, and you'll hear about some of that. But it just goes to increase and multiply the number of challenges that we face as Jewish educators. Our panelists are going to share their thoughts. What are they seeing in the field as they make their way out among their constituents? And where do we go from here? First, I'll introduce the speakers. Then I'll invite each to present their thoughts on the topic. And then we should have a few minutes for Q&A, and then we'll go off to our breakout groups and have more Q&A and discussion. So moving from the end down this way, I'll do all the introductions now and then turn it over to our friends from Ramah. Dr. Daniel Olson is the Assistant National Director at the National Ramah Commission. His work there has focused on a wide range of topics, including mental health support, inclusion initiatives, Israel education, and strengthening day camps. He completed his PhD in Education and Jewish Studies at NYU in 2020 and wrote his dissertation, an excellent work, I must say, about birthright Israel trips for young adults with developmental disabilities. Next to him, moving down this way, Amy Scott Cooper is Chief Executive Officer of the Ramah Camping Movement. Prior to this, Amy served as Associate Director from 2004 to 2011 and as Director of the Ramah Day Camp in Nyack from 1997 to 2017. A graduate of Hebrew University in Jerusalem, Amy holds degrees in Jewish history and Jewish education. She received her master's degree from Brandeis University in Jewish Education and Communal Service and is a recipient of the 2011 Covenant Award for Outstanding Jewish Educators. Dr. Daniel Olson, and again, thank you for sitting in on short notice.
Rabbi Daniel Brenner.
I'm looking at the wrong Daniel. Rabbi Daniel Brenner, and thank you for sitting in on short notice, serves as the Vice President of Education at Moving Traditions, where he weaves together ancient wisdom, developmental psychology, social pedagogy, embodied practice, and pop culture to help a diverse network of rabbi, educators, and volunteer leaders who mentor teens. Prior to this, Daniel led educational programs for CLAL, the National Jewish Center for Learning and Leadership, Auburn Theological Seminary, and the Birthright Israel Foundation. He's a graduate of the University of Wisconsin and the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College. And Acharon Habib, Peter Geffen, I got that name right, thank you, is the founder and president of the Kivunim Institute, providing an international Jewish education in an integrated academic experiential program for both gap year students and teachers from public, private, and independent schools. He is involved in numerous projects promoting peace and mutual understanding between Arabs and Jews across the Middle East and North Africa region. As a former assistant to Dr. Martin Luther King, he continues to be involved in Black, Jewish, and anti-racism work. He is also the founder of the Abraham Joshua Heschel School and of the Park Avenue Synagogue High School, both here in New York. He is a Camp Ramah alum of many years and the father of two seminary alum, Rabbi Jonah Geffen and Nessa Geffen, and of HUC Rabbi Daniel Geffen. Peter is also a recipient of the Covenant Award. So we have a wonderful panel here, and we're privileged and honored for them. The folks from Ramah, this is Daniel Olson, and Amy Scott Cooper will kick us off with some data and discussion of it.
Thank you. Can I be heard okay? Amazing. The Ramah camping movement is a Zionist movement. What does that mean for us? For us, being a Zionist movement in the 21st century means fostering in our campers and staff a sense of belonging and attachment with the people of Israel and a connection with the land of Israel as a Jewish homeland. We do this in a variety of age-appropriate ways. Our kids start when they're 5. Our staff typically end when they're around 25. And with the same joyfulness that is a hallmark of each Ramah camp. Music, dance, visual arts, Hebrew immersion, formal classes and lectures, tefillah, and especially our emphasis on relationship building with the close to 400 shlichim who are part of the Ramah family each summer.
Relationship building with shlichim works best when they understand that it's not their job to share haspara, talking points. Both we and our partners at the Jewish Agency explain to shlichim as a part of their training that their greatest influence will come not through explaining why the world in general and social media in particular misunderstand Israel. Rather, they must prepare themselves to do the patient, not always immediately fulfilling work of relationship building across age, linguistic, and cultural differences. They represent Israel by being themselves. At its best, this relationship building goes in both directions, with North American campers and staff members feeling a strong sense of connection to Israel through the Israelis they meet, and Israelis gaining more respect for and knowledge about conservative/Masorti Judaism. In all of our educational settings, cultural, language, formal programming, tefillah, and relationship building, we acknowledge and provide space to teach and express a wide range of opinions about what precisely the state of Israel should look like, what the government's policies should be, the challenges of the Israeli social fabric, how Israel acts towards the Palestinian people, and how Israel is perceived on the world stage. We encourage and have taught our staff how to have nuanced conversation, provided our camps with extensive Israel resources that capture this nuance, and have partnered with a number of other educators and organizations to create space for constructive dialogue.
Sending North American Romanics to Israel is another key element of our educational philosophy. Rama Israel Seminar is a capstone Israel educational experience for our Rama camper graduates, the rising seniors in high school. We regard seminar as the formative Israel experience for our campers and the opportunity to form enduring relationships with Am Yisrael, with Israeli peers, shlichim, and Romanics from other camps, while experiencing firsthand Israel's complexities. During their 6 weeks in Israel, participants will volunteer and meet with Israelis living on the periphery. They'll learn politics and geopolitics from a variety of perspectives. They'll meet with Arabs and Jews living in mixed towns, and when possible, travel to the West Bank to speak with both Palestinians and settlers. This past summer, seminar participants spent time at Nova, Kikar Chatufim, the car graveyard at Moshav Tekuma, and learned from Rachel Goldberg, Poland. As much as we set the table and create space for campers, seminar participants, shlichim, and North American staff to grapple with complex issues, we also establish limits as to what is acceptable debate and what are the red lines in a Rama setting. Red line number 1. We unapologetically support the self-determination and statehood for the Jewish people in the land of Israel, period. Anti-Zionist rhetoric and outspoken antagonism towards Israel are not permitted at Ramah camps. And number 2, we unapologetically prohibit any form of racism and bigotry in our educational institution, period. Suggesting as an example that Palestinians should be banished from the land is never permitted at a Ramah camp. Our articulation of these fundamental red lines gives camper families and staff the opportunity to consider whether Ramah is a comfortable setting for them, and accordingly, we find that the overwhelming majority of camper families and staff at our camps agree with our approach. October 7th. I was woken up at 3 a.m. on October 7th by my Shomer Shabbat son, a paratrooper in the IDF. And he did not mince words. And I was on a flight to Tel Aviv the next morning. On a personal note, it is hard to lead an organization, to be an Israel educator, to speak with clarity, to maintain perspective, and to think strategically when one has a child entering Gaza. It became even harder when we learned that the 2 young men with close ties to Ramah, Hirsch and Omer Nutra, were among the hostages taken by Hamas on October 7th. We joined in the global chorus of voices calling for their release. We watched with awe as Hirsch and Omer's parents bravely spoke to any and every audience. We mourned when Hirsch was murdered after the camp season had ended in August. And we continue to call for Omer's release and all the remaining hostages' freedom.
Even in the first weeks of the war, we kept our eyes on the upcoming summer, very concerned about shlichim and their physical and emotional welfare. We wondered if they would be coming to camp at all. And if they were able to come to camp, how would camp be affected if many of them were called back into service midsummer? And as time went on, in light of the political dynamic in North America, we asked ourselves what would happen if there were major political conflicts in camp during the summer. Faced with a potential educational crisis, both the National Ramah Commission and the individual Ramah camps quickly began planning for all the challenges and opportunities that this year's circumstances were likely to bring. This work included commissioning a new curriculum from the great Devorah Greenberg, who's in today's audience, and engaging in scenario planning, anticipating various possible incidents. In addition, we knew early on that one of our priorities would be to bring as many Romanics to Israel as possible, to bear witness, to listen to people's stories, to volunteer and to be present. Between December and June, we organized 26 solidarity missions and brought almost 650 North American teens, college students, and adults of all ages to Israel. This work has continued this year too. Right before the Chagim, we were so proud to bring a group of a dozen alumni of Ramah's Tikva programs for kids, teenagers, and young adults with disabilities to Israel for a similar volunteer experience.
The group that we were most concerned about were our college-age staff members, young adults who were experiencing a tumultuous year on campus, exposed to constant anti-Zionist rhetoric. We wanted to ensure that they could get to Israel with Ramah, free of charge, for an intense week of volunteering, study, and meeting with their Israeli partners before coming to work at Ramah this summer. We knew that the relationship building with Shlichim would be key to ensuring productive dialogue at camp. And thanks to the extraordinary generosity of Onward Israel and several major foundations and philanthropists, we brought together over 300 North Americans and Shlichim, all working at Ramah this summer on 2 back-to-back missions right before the start of camp. This trip meant a great deal personally to the North American participants and Israelis alike. For North American participants, bearing witness to places like Nova and working in Israeli orchards and fields was a way to make a tangible contribution after a year of largely symbolic, heated discourse on college campuses. For Shlichim, seeing so many North Americans travel to Israel in the middle of a war showed Ramah's commitment to Israel in action. When we weren't volunteering or getting to know Shlichim, we were studying at the Hartman Institute. Now, there is a range of how well 19 to 22-year-olds will engage in academic-style text learning after rising at 4 a.m. to pick crops. But those staff members who dove into the material became the leaders at their camps last summer in modeling how to have conversations about themes like the difference among pluralism, tolerance, and deviance when it comes to different worldviews and behaviors on Israel, and many other topics at camp. One of the most memorable takeaways from our time in Hartman came from Rabbi Daniel Hartman directly, when he implored our young adults to do the hard work of defining their personal visions of Zionism based on deep study and encounter before jumping in to campus activism debate. When Ramah is at its best, our camps give staff members and campers the space to do that learning and that thinking.
And now, as promised, some data from post-summer research that we conducted. We surveyed hundreds of North American and Israeli staff members about how they encountered Israel at Ramah camps this summer. We supplemented these results with in-depth interviews with over 30 camp directors, senior Israel educators, heads of Mishlachat delegations, and staff who attended one of these Israel trips. The research revealed what we're calling a primary story of Israel at camp this summer with 4 components. First, Ramah camps were widely felt to be places of safety and comfort. We cannot take this for granted, not after the difficult year for so many of our staff members, Israelis in particular, who served and lost friends and loved ones over the course of the year. Second, Ramah camps considered age appropriateness as a factor when deciding how to teach and how to publicly represent October 7th and its aftermath. Ramah directors needed to balance a number of competing perspectives in accounting for age appropriateness. Everything from parental desires to staff perspectives to academic research to their own educational stances. Third, prayer, visual commemoration, and storytelling about October 7th and its aftermath were among the most powerful moments in camp. To share just one of many, this one from Ramah, California, we gathered the entire Machaneh and formed a hostage ribbon during the first session and a Magen David during the second session, filmed by a drone. It really felt like the entire Kehillah community was buying in. That day, our Ida age group also attended a presentation on Omer Nutra by 2 Tzevet members who know him. I've never seen a group of 12-year-olds be so respectful and invested in a lesson. And fourth, many North American staff members shared that being at camp was a soothing balm after a tense year on campus and felt camp was a space to have conversations that were just too fraught to take part in on campus. The predominant attitude towards this primary story about Israel at camp this summer was positive. People felt really good about what they experienced and created at camp. This primary story on Israel education could have been a catastrophic one if things had gone differently. But instead, thanks to a tremendous amount of foresight and hard work during the preseason, it wasn't. Still, and this is important, in some survey and interview responses, we also found evidence of a secondary story, with some staff members reporting that they needed to self-censor, especially if they had strong critical perspectives on Israel's conduct during the war. Some Israeli and North American staff members expressed difficulty in communicating with and listening to each other after experiencing such vastly different circumstances since October 7th. And some staff members felt there was a lack of nuance in the kinds of Israel-related learning and discussions that took place at camp. It was possible to present dual narratives and more critical perspectives on Israel when camp leadership explicitly invited such ideas. The accusation that Ramah camps lacked nuance when it came to discussing the war this summer is not entirely fair. A number of Ramah camps hosted formal conversations for staff and older campers about the ethics of hostage negotiations, proportionality, dual narratives of Israeli-Palestinian history, and more.
The default approach this summer was to prioritize the mental health and well-being of the many Israelis in camp. This instinct is understandable given the difficulty and intensity of our past year. Moving past this default required active intervention from camp leaders to give people permission to get closer to our camp's red lines while still not crossing them. And understandably, different directors had different approaches and attitudes to extending this invitation. Moving forward, we should be aware about the impact of our educational decisions, both of commission and omission, and on the kind of conversation and experiences we have in camp. We don't know when post-war will come, where there's a time for an educational approach to focus on community and care. There is a time for an educational approach to be focused on critical discourse about the future of Israel. Within any approach remains the subjective question about age appropriateness. We look ahead to next summer and beyond with a great deal of humility, knowing that we still need to be prepared to meet the needs of the moment, while at the same time giving our learners the tools to be ready to respond to the next one and the next one. Thank you.
So a few minutes ago, I was eyeing the egg salad, and Jeff walked up to me and said, we need a substitute panelist, could you do it? And of course I said yes, but I'm telling this story because if you would have asked me 2 years ago, if you would have told me 2 years ago, you're gonna be on a panel about Zionism at a conference about Zionism at Jewish Theological Seminary, I would have thought, did I change jobs? Because my job for the past 13 years has been focused on the spiritual and emotional well-being of teenagers in the Jewish community. And my colleagues at Moving Traditions, what we do is we focus on adolescence, what it means to come of age, what it means to become an adult. Our programs, which are running in well over 200 synagogues, are focused on the parent-child relationship through the Bar Mitzvah process, and are focused on 8th and 9th graders as they think about themselves, their relationships to their friends, and their participation in the wider community. And for so long, we have been doing the work that we've done, starting from the very beginning in Moving Traditions with our Rosh Chodesh program, which many of you have probably heard of. But for so long, our focus was simply on what is going on with teenagers And what can we, as Jewish educators, as parents, and as clergy, do to support them? And we did not have to think about Israel, about Zionism, because we did not have to think about it. It just was not primary in our minds. It was not essential to the work that we were doing educationally. Did we have some Israel-related content within our education? Of course we did. But it was never primary or explicit. So this October 7th forced us to ask a new set of questions. And I want to say a little bit about how we understood teenagers before October 7th, and then say a little bit about how we understand teenagers now. So there is a wonderful phrase that I'm borrowing from a religious scholar named Dr. Christian Smith about teenagers and what they believe about the world. They are therapeutic moral deists. What does it mean to be a therapeutic moral deist? Well, my mental health matters. Being a good person matters. And God is real, but God is not that real. Okay, that's what it means. And that is the general religious atmosphere, spiritual atmosphere of American life. And the more teenagers' lives have been overtaken by the transactional and the digital, the more disconnected they have become from the natural world, from humans and human contact and human communication, and from all communities, the Jewish community included. So when we came into October 7th, we were mainly focused on the social isolation and depression and anxiety that teenagers were facing, and thinking, how do we support them in what they are going through? Because we know from extensive research that you know what it takes to help a teenager go from contemplating suicide to being a productive person in the world? One caring adult. That's what it takes. We know that. So, our focus before was on mental health, and when October 7th happened, our questions were, how is this going to impact the mental health of teenagers? That's where we started. Because what we saw with the adults is the following. We heard it this morning, Shoah 2.0. And I remember hearing one of my heroes, Yuval Harari, in the very first interview that he gave after October 7th. And what did he say? He said, it's a pogrom. So from what they're hearing from the adults is, let me translate it, they're all coming to kill us. That is not a good message for teenagers to hear if you're trying to encourage them to be Jewish and to be part of the Jewish community. Come join us, they're killing us. Not the healthiest message. And yet, if there ever was a moment where we had to stand up and defend ourselves, if there ever was a moment where we had to instill in teenagers a sense of pride and strength, this is the moment. So here we are in this world where we had no idea that we would be shifting some of our educational work into thinking about questions around nationalism, questions around community responsibility, peoplehood, Jewish identity, but that is, unfortunately, exactly what October 7th did. Now, I don't want to be hyperbolic. We know from extensive research done by Eitan Hirsch and others that what happened is in the months after October 7th, that was the worst time of this. That was the most dangerous time to be out as a Jew as a teenager. That was the time when most of the anti-Semitic incidents happened. That was the worst time, and then it leveled down a little bit, not enough for my taste, but that's what we know. That said, I found myself in meeting after meeting with teenagers when they started a story. I've never told anybody this, but I've been bullied in my school. I've never told anybody this, but I was bullied on my soccer team. And teenager after teenager, if they are with somebody in a situation where they feel safe to talk about their experience as a Jew in the past year, you'll hear these stories again and again and again. They did not feel like people were out to kill them, but they did feel that people were behind their backs talking about them. They did feel that they were being really singled out. I remember, and I'll never forget this because I was with a group of teenagers in Vancouver. Very challenging place to be a teenager right now as a Jew. And one of the young girls in the group said, they took a photo of me, they put underneath the photo, Zionist bitch, and they sent it to everyone in the school. So I can only imagine what happened when she first saw that photo. I can only imagine. So it is very real. The threats that our teenagers are facing are very real. And yet, I think our job as educators is not to frighten or scare or traumatize teenagers more, but to give them a realistic assessment of the situation that we're in and to tell them the truth about the world the way that we see it. And I think that this entire conference has been on this theme, speaking the truth about how complicated the history of Zionism is and how complex it is and how it is so many things, and we want every young person to experience the depth of all the things that it is. One of the things that I loved about the presentation that we just heard was the words of Daniel Hartman. No, learn more, complicate your understanding of Israel. Like, that's where the real action is, and I think for all of us as educators, that is our dream. Our dream is that not only will young people read basic books and information about Israel, but they will read scholarship and they will experience living in Israel. We cannot give up on those dreams. Set your ideals high as an educator, always. And for Zionism, I think the very highest ideal, the very pedagogy of Zionism, is ecological. That is what it began with. There is no substitute for connecting yourself to the land, for working the land and eating the produce of the land. That is deep within Torah. That is deep within Zionism. That is the primary pedagogy. That is what we must all aim for. There is no substitute to that seasonal connection. We know it. We know that that's the dream. So I don't want to dilute that dream in any way. Yet, here we are in the situation where we are asked as an organization, how can you help us help our teenagers respond to the realities that they are facing right now? So I am very fortunate. I have the most amazing colleagues. Two of them are in the room right now, and I want to shout out to Pam Barkley and Jonah Peretzlang, and they have been the two people who have been pushing forward a new series of Israel and Zionist-related educational content that we're focusing on for 8th and 9th graders. And I just want to say one thing in closing about how we're approaching this. We are taking this content that is on Jewish identity in Israel and not making it into a separate program, but integrating it into an already existing program that is focused on teens and their self-growth and personal development and their relationships. And I think that that is a really important piece of how we're approaching this. Because what we want to say is that this is a crisis, but we don't want to lose touch with the bigger picture of the why be Jewish and the joy of being Jewish and the wisdom that we get from Judaism. So we're integrating as much as we can Israel education into a pre-existing program, and we already have close to 30 partners who are going to pilot this work with us, and I'm very excited about what we're going to be learning from them.
Amazing for only knowing you were going to do that an hour.
Okay, I was inspired by the egg salad.
So I have a loud voice. Can you hear me clearly? Okay, good. Don't start your clock. I just want to.
A few words before,
No,
a few words before you say a few
two
words.
little caveats. One is that whatever I say that may be disturbing to anybody in the audience, it's not about you. No institution and no person here is reflected in my comments. Everyone here is doing the right thing in the right place at the right time. So that's clear. And that's, that's probably enough of an intro, except to say that my comments were written, directed at both my own experience, starting as a kid, through to today, which is a long time already, as you can see by the hair on my head, and, or the hair that's not on my head, meaning that the Jewish education that I received and that I have delivered, in my opinion, has been highly inadequate with regard to the topic that is underneath our topic of today, which is how do we deal with this question of Israel, Jews, Zionism, Palestinians, the Arab world, etc. So I hope that my comments will sort of give some clarity to that little sentence, and off we go. Now, you got it. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel said, quote, "The teacher is the creator of the future of our people. She or he must teach the pupils to evaluate the past in order to clarify their future." And Bob Dylan, an alum of Camp Herzl, somewhere out there in the Midwest, said, "The times they are a-changing." What shall we teach about Israel, Zionism, Palestinians, Arabs, Islam, and how shall we teach it? Or stated a little bit more cynically, what were we afraid of, and what are we still afraid of? When I began my formal role in Jewish education at the Park Avenue Synagogue in September of 1967, don't rub it in, it was, as some will remember, a tumultuous time. In the Jewish world, the 6 Days War gave a sense of elation, albeit very temporary, as we have seen for many decades, while America was in the midst of profound social and political crisis. With the encouragement of our high school students, we together created an after-school program that drew students from the Upper East and West Sides in extraordinary numbers and with great time commitment on their part. In contrast to the assumptions offered yesterday by Professor Wertheimer, we successfully combined a social justice commitment, manifested such things as participation in and attendance at anti-Vietnam War demonstrations in Washington, D.C., and a deep engagement with the State of Israel and Jewish communities around the world. But a course on Israel and Zionism was a challenge to design. I turned first to my closest friend, John Ruskay, who was then a PhD candidate at Columbia University's Middle East Institute and would later become a vice chancellor of this distinguished institution. John designed and taught what became a legendary and radical course entitled Arab-Jewish Perspectives on the Middle East, within which he was teaching about Palestinian nationalism in a synagogue school before the word Palestinian was even used on television or radio. That course, taught by several outstanding young teachers over the following 18 years, did not alienate our young Jews from Israel, even though it used the terms occupied territory and occupation. It motivated students to want a summer trip to Israel where they surveyed shopkeepers in Bethlehem about their feelings regarding Israeli rule, and where they explored the discriminated experience of Arab Israelis in villages and communities across the country. Learning the problems of the Arab minority within the walls and programs of a Jewish school allowed our young people to do exactly what Elliot Cosgrove spoke of last night: face and maintain conflicting ideas, experiences, and knowledge within an overall direction of conviction and engagement. It did not inspire alienation. It inspired trust. But what we were doing at the Park Avenue Synagogue was an oasis. It was not replicated across the country. We were criticized. When running our summer programs in Israel within the framework of what used to be called the Ramah Community Seminars program, I was not so jokingly greeted each morning with the words, Boker Tov, Yasser Arafat, by the Israeli Ramah office staff because of our use of the word occupation and our travels to Bethlehem to meet and engage with local Arabs. When I designed Kivunim in 2006, we needed a more serious course, lasting a whole year and being eligible for transferable college credits. Again, the question, how shall we design our course on Middle East studies or Zionism and Israel for the Kivunim Gap Year program? It presented an even greater challenge. 30 years had passed since those initial Israel experiences at Park Avenue Synagogue High School, and there was much troubled water under the bridge. How should we begin such study? What should be the opener, which will set the tone? Yesterday, someone quoted a source saying, "Hope is not a strategy." I beg to differ. I believe that any educational program aimed at young people, even in these challenging times, must be fueled by hopefulness and driven by the optimism that is so characteristic of youth. It must not merely be a coincidence that our Jewish national anthem is called Hatikva, the hope. It is hopefulness that has fueled our people throughout the ages. It is in our prayers and is expressed throughout our holidays. So how then, in that spirit, should we begin this year-long course that we have chosen to call Land, People, Ideas, the Challenges of the Middle East? We decided to go with a selection of videos of the historic visit to Jerusalem by President Anwar Sadat of Egypt in 1977, and the signing of the Camp David Accords between President Jimmy Carter, President Sadat, and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin. We correctly assumed that our students, many coming from some of the finest day schools in the country, have never seen the footage. They have never heard Menachem Begin say, quote, "I do not think there has ever been in history an example of the leader of one warring state coming to the other to offer peace," unquote. They see the faces of Israeli Jews waving Egyptian flags less than 4 years after the massive attack led by Sadat himself on Israel on Yom Kippur, 1973. They see the Knesset rise in respect, Sadat speaking in Arabic from its podium, people on the streets ecstatic. Imagine if every Jewish school around the world had been celebrating and commemorating the peace treaties with Egypt and Jordan all these past years. A short tefillah included on the anniversary, some pictures in the school hallways, a rabbi's sermon on Shabbat. You can come up with many reasons to explain our reticence, to justify it, but we have missed an opportunity for our students to witness hope turned into optimism, turned into action, to imagine a different reality, to manifest the words of David Ben-Gurion, quote, "A person who does not believe in miracles is not a realist," unquote. Teaching hopefulness is not abstract. Kivunim students visit Morocco each year. Why? Because Kivunim's educational decisions are driven by the value proposition stated in our mission, quote, "Jewish education for the 21st century must help to minimize fears and maximize comfort with people, cultures, and religions that are different than our own, both as Americans and as Jews," unquote. This worldview is the natural outgrowth of reappreciating the Jewish diaspora, of encountering the richness and beauty of Jewish civilization across the world. Our travels over the past 20 years to Morocco have taught our students a great deal about what the Moroccan Muslims call convivencia, Jewish-Muslim coexistence. Listen to these words of King Mohammed VI, offered to the UNESCO Conference on Anti-Semitism, held in Marrakesh in September 2018. Quote, "Today's meeting is taking place," and by the way, listen to the language in terms of today and what we're facing at the moment. "Today's meeting," King Mohammed VI said, "is taking place at a time when several parts of the world are witnessing tendencies towards exclusion, reclusiveness, and rejection of the other. Migrants are too often made scapegoats. Refugees are instrumentalized and minorities stigmatized. Hate speech is on the rise, fueling racism, xenophobia, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and many other forms of discrimination which provide a breeding ground for violent extremism and growing insecurity. Racism in general, and anti-Semitism in particular, are by no means just a way of thinking. Anti-Semitism, says the king, is the antithesis of freedom of expression. It implies a denial of the other and is an admission of failure, inadequacy, and an inability to coexist. It implies an anachronistic return to a mythicized past. Is that the past we want to bequeath to future generations as a legacy?" He concludes. "These calamities, which are plaguing many communities, should not be allowed to dim the torch we are going to pass on to future generations." Or his words about the Holocaust in a proclamation issued in 2009, quote, "We live in a time which is not neutral, a time in which the collective imagination of all of our societies is also fueled by the prospect of exclusion and failure when it comes to the promises of dialogue between our civilizations, our cultures, and our religions. Hence, we must together endeavor to reassert reason and the values which underpin the legitimacy of a space of convivencia, of coexistence, where the words of dignity, justice, and freedom will express themselves in the same way and will coexist with the same requirements, regardless of our origins, cultures, or spiritualities. This is our interpretation in Morocco of the duty of remembrance dictated by the Shoah," unquote. The King of Morocco claims direct descent from the Prophet Muhammad and holds the title of Defender of the Faithful for the entire Islamic world. Will you imagine the impact if our college Hillels paid tribute to the Moroccan royal family by reading these full documents at a public ceremony each year? I am not suggesting that we can erase the impact of these past months. I am strongly suggesting that building into our educational programs a more positive and accurate story of Jewish life across the last 1,500 years within the Arab world will not only benefit the cultural and ethnic pride of our Jewish students from Arab heritage, it will change the tone of the Jewish people's relationship with the whole Arab world. We must become centers of intellectual openness. Our students should not learn about leveled villages and refugees from a college course on settler colonialism. Whatever there is to tell, the good and the bad, should be material we are willing and able to teach within our own walls. College should not surprise our students with facts we did not tell them. And on the positive side, enriched study of our people's experience within the Arab world will tell a story filled with Jewish-Arab culture and moments of elation on the one hand, and yes, sadness on the other, just like our experiences amongst the Christian nations of Europe. When Kivunim alumni returned to campus after study and travel in Morocco, Egypt, and Turkey, and a full year of study of Arabic and Islamic culture alongside their Hebrew and international Jewish studies, they are able to disarm the hostility with their respect, their knowledge, and their appreciation. Finally, my teacher, the great Jewish historian Cecil Roth, put the importance of the Jewish experience amongst the nations of the world in this way, quote, "It is for him, a Jew, not merely a record. It is at once an inspiration and an apologia. Only from his history can he be brought to appreciate not only his former glory, but his former degradation, to realize its causes and to sympathize with its consequences. It is only from an appreciation of his past can he be imbued with self-respect and hope for his future." Thank you very much.
Wow. I want to thank the panelists for their powerful presentations, interweaving their work, their concrete contributions in the field with the big ideas that we've been grappling with the past 2 days. We have a couple of minutes for questions. So if someone is running around a micro, Ariel or whoever, yeah, okay. Yeah. Is there a hand up there? Yep, great.
So, thank you for a great speech. I really appreciated all of the comments. I'm a student here at JTS, and I've had the opportunity to visit Ramah camps a couple of times on List College retreats. And when I visited Ramah, I've seen this map of Israel-Palestine, and in this map, it shows, this is at the Berkshires and at the Nyack camps, and it is right by the Beit Sifriya, and it shows there's an absence of the green line, and you talk about red lines in conversations, and I'm wondering how that fits in to educating your students at Ramah about the complicated realities of Israel being in occupying power, and how that fits into age appropriateness.
I imagine that's for you folks.
So I don't have a catalog of every public-facing map of Israel-Palestine across the Ramah movement. I know that there are many that do include the border of the Green Line. I know there are a number of lesson plans that are used within Ramah camps that we've also led with our staff that give a detailed look on different maps and what stories they're telling and what stories they're not telling. And I think one of this question raises a larger question for us in Ramah when we think about Israel education and Israel conversation in camp, what the differences are between public-facing pieces of that discourse and conversation and what I would call semi-public features of that discourse or conversation. And sometimes more is available to be talked about and discussed in the semi-public space of a class or a bunk conversation or an ADA presentation, and what takes place publicly is a little bit different. But you'll find many public-facing maps of Israel-Palestine in Ramah camps that do in fact include the Green Line.
I would just add that the curriculum that we've referenced, and again with gratitude to Devorah Greenberg, is public online, available to all of the educators here to use all of it or pieces of it.
Great. Another question maybe directed to other panelists. Sorry.
Yeah.
But
sorry.
Yeah, go for
So first of all, thank you everybody for the great presentation. Sorry, I do have another question for Amy and Daniel. You mentioned, Amy, that you found that there were some things that were omitted, that staff felt was omitted in their discussions this past summer, or Daniel did. My question is this: looking ahead to the future for this coming spring, summer, what are you thinking about in terms of how to structure to include more of those things that were omitted and maybe have those staff members feel more comfortable to be expressive?
Thank you. I still think it's too early to know exactly what the circumstances of next summer will bring. But I look to the last major war in Gaza as potential guidance here. The summer of 2014 was the last major extended war that took place. And that summer in camp was also a time primarily remembered as one of comfort and care. That's what a lot of the Israel discourse in camp looked like in the summer of 2014. In contrast, the summer of 2015 was a summer when a lot of camp directors were prioritizing a critical conversation about the future of Israel. Lots of conversations with older campers and staff members about what their individual Zionism meant to them. conversation about what it takes to look forward to the day after. I don't know if those are the circumstances that 2025 will bring to us. Personally, I sure hope that the war is over by the time our camps open in June of next year. And if that's the case, I expect we'll see some of what we saw in 2015 happening this year again.
All right, one quick question for different panels. You had your hand up for a while. And this will be the last question.
Thanks, I'll try to make it quick. First of all, thank you so much for all the work that you are doing on the ground and for this engaging conversation. I actually have a pedagogical question, maybe that steps back a little bit, that stems from a lot of time that I've spent teaching teenagers, students, some of whom are in the room, very exciting. A lot of the discussion today and in previous days, and honestly, not just in this context, focuses on teaching topic X, right? We're going to sit and have a discussion about power, about struggle, about, right, X, Y, and Z, whether it's with Israel or, frankly, any Jewish topic. And I wonder what space, when we're thinking about, right, general pedagogical trends for teens from across the board, what space is there to say, okay, take a step back and learn, perhaps taking a cue from more traditional communities and like maybe even the Haredi communities and say, we just jump in and we study, right? We study on a Sachet of Gemara, not knowing that it's going to hit topics X, Y, Z, A, B, C, interwoven together. And obviously this requires a certain skill set, but there is something, and I wonder where this comes to play, where we're not focusing on a topic. We're actually just imbibing it as if it's, right, our mother's milk. And I think there's a certain advantage to that by saying, if we just teach Torah towards power, then, well, what if we engage with something else? Then is there an answer to Torah, to that area? And so when an approach is we kind of just amass, well, then actually Torah has an answer for everything. So I don't see or hear in a lot of, frankly, more liberal communities, Torah, I don't want to call it Torah Lishma, it's not really Torah Lishma, but it's Torah writ large, instead of Torah topic X, Torah topic Y.
All right, very brief answer from any of the panelists. A response, not answer. Yep.
You need the microphone.
Yep. So here.
So I want to respond to that by sharing one of my strategies for dealing with somebody who is coming at me with the current narrative of Israel is a white settler colonial project, etc. I often just say, pick one of these places. Sfat, and read the Wikipedia entry, or Tiberias, read the Wikipedia entry. Like, pick a particular place, because there's something beautiful about history. When you are focusing on one Masechet or one place, everything flows into that. So if you know the story of Sfat, the story of white settler colonialism just doesn't make sense. You know there is more to the story. And I think that as Jewish educators, one of the things that we need to do is think about what are those micro stories that tell a larger story, so we don't get trapped by whatever the parlance of the day is. And we are making space for that curiosity and that desire to learn and that sense that history is layers upon layers upon layers, and I am part of this next layer.
Good. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to be very careful.
No, go.
Look, everybody in this room has some association, personally or professionally or both, with Jewish education. So if we're honest with ourselves, for the last decades and decades, certainly my whole lifetime, most of our educational systems have been trying desperately to create an emotional bond that might lead to somebody wanting to know a little bit more. As a result of that process, we have a lot of people teaching even in synagogue schools around the country whose knowledge base on any topic, let alone on this question of Israel, Zionism, Middle East, is about this thick. So there's a revolutionary change that has to take place. But the first piece would be an attitudinal change, that we think that this is important, because I'm frankly worried as I watch and participate, and I participate obviously, in all of these, one after the other, different kinds of conferences and commemorations about October 7th, that we're feeling ourselves looking for another one of these hooks that we had when I was a kid, when everything that was taught to me was about the Holocaust. Because then the assumption of the educator was not even conscious, subconscious, that I would feel as a child some sense of responsibility, maybe even a little bit of guilt, and then I would grow up to be a responsible member of the community. We have to commemorate, and we have to respect, and we have to pay great honor to those who really suffered an extraordinary loss over the course of this last year, October 7th and onward. These soldiers every day that I read about, they're just young people. It's horrible. But at the same time, we have to move on to something that's going to take us beyond this. And that may be a very difficult challenge some of us may not want to participate in, but that's the only way we get to the future. That's the only way. I was telling at lunch, I told Arnie this story that, when Heschel was interviewed on one of the two great interviews of in his last year of life, the interviewer was asking him about his anti-war protests, and he was saying, really nobody's participating in these protests, a very small number, everybody is just going along with things, and finally, Carl Stern, the interviewer, said, Rabbi Heschel, you sound so pessimistic. Are you as pessimistic as you sound? And Heschel said, no, I am an optimist against my better judgment. So I think that's the story of the Jewish people. In other words, we have to now, at the same moment that we commemorate, even mourn, we have to have our eyes out to a different kind of future, and we have to be building that future. We cannot wallow in this moment, as important as it is to be respectful. And in Israel, it's exactly the same process. And it's taking place. I watch the Israeli news every day. I've got a whole staff working every day. People are also living their lives. Yes, as we were told, people are really shaken deeply to the core. And at the same time, life has got to move to the next stage. That's part of our responsibility as Jewish educators, maybe the most important that we have.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all. And for a more comprehensive response to that previous question, our recruitment people for our Masters in Jewish Education are here in the room. So find Andy Lewis, Rabbi Andy.